Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Vestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness,
Darkness,
but ours.
but ours. Last week we looked at the queer horror fiction of Vernon Lee, Marjorie Bowen, and Louisa May Alcott, and the bleak fictional portrayals of female queerness and sexuality in a world which denied those women any possibility of a happy ending in life. In this episode, we'll be turning our attention to the works of Shirley Jackson, Caitlin R. Kiernan, and Hailey Piper, and more besides. Moving on from Bowen and from Alcott, Shirley Jackson, of course, we haven't talked about.
Yes.
Certainly, there's that very kind of implied lesbian attraction between Eleanor and Theo.
Yes, and Theo is pretty obviously again, it's unspoken.
Yeah.
No one says, Theo, are you a lesbian? But it is like, this, my dear intimate friend with whom I live, has destroyed, torn beautiful love letters to shreds and destroyed things of mine. And I'm like, fuck, I'm going to go to a haunted house. Screw you.
This is one of the things you have to get used to. It's when you go from sort of reading, say, Stephen King to reading Shirley Jackson or other early writers like Machen as well, there is that thing of they couldn't come out and they couldn't
say things.
Come out, yeah. So they had to imply it, they had to hint, and so in a way, you sort of you have to kind of get used to picking things up picking up those implications, picking up things on a different frequency. Once you do,
but it helps with Shirley Jackson because a lot of her stuff is kind of sobrosa, anyways. A lot of her stuff is like. So. What are you actually? Oh, that's what you're actually saying. Okay, interesting.
Now, I don't know about Jackson's own sexuality. I believe the film about it with Elizabeth Moss actually has her.
It's very queer.
Yeah,
it's a pretty queer film. Jackson's background. It's like, okay, so she has a very overbearing mom. And she does not think of herself as attractive, because she is a lady of size and has big glasses and stuff like that. And she marries this guy to some degree get away from the thumb of her mom. I think she really understood the Eleanor dynamic. Yeah. She understood that very intimately, and also to offend her mother because he was Jewish.
And, he was he was repeatedly unfaithful, wasn't he? I think super to an open marriage.
Yeah, super unfaithful. He was just like ridiculous about it, and she was like, fine, okay, I'm a housewife, but I work my black magic under everything. It's like literally she called herself a witch at certain points in her life. And I think she just even making up these horrible stories that she would then sell to make her own money.
Well, she became the main breadwinner in the household. He controlled the finances. He was obviously there was again those kind of weird power dynamics going on there. But as I say, while she eventually agreed to an open marriage, possibly just to spare her sanity while he was putting his dick in anything that couldn't run away fast enough. But I couldn't. I mean, I've only really had time to consult her to study her Wikipedia page on this one. But there's nothing about whether she conducted any.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a weird sort of thing when you're looking at older female writers because, the idea of being unmarried was not really an option. It's like if you wanted to live outside of your family's house, outside of your, the house that you were born into, you had to get married. And, and there's a certain freedom and a certain power that goes with that, but then you're under somebody else's quote, quote, care and somebody else's power. The idea that she was the breadwinner and yet he controlled the finances, it's like super normal for the 40s and the 50s.
Of course,
and so, it's did she have sexuality that she did not act on? Did she have sexuality that she did act on? I think there's, when you look at her stuff, there's a lot of roily boily shit that's going on inside of it. And, it's like people are very much living in a world where you can't say anything about anything. And their emotions and their wants, their desires, their hatreds are so huge that they pop out into, certainly in the case of Eleanor, that they pop out into in Hill House, that they pop out into the supernatural realm,
Yeah.
And Eleanor is the person who's always saying, yeah. What was it? A rain of stones fell on your house for 3 days.
Yes.
Oh yeah, well that wasn't us. That had nothing to do with us. That was just the neighbors. The neighbors did that. They didn't like us. It's like they resented us. It's like it's never her.
Yeah.
Even though somebody's like writing, help Eleanor, come home Eleanor, all over everything. It's like never has anything to do with her. The only thing that she can have a relationship with is the house.
Yes.
It's not even the ghost of anybody. It's the house. It's like, I want to be accepted. I want to be loved. I want to be, I want to have a home. It's like, I want I want a cup of stars. I want, I want little lions, little stone lions by my gate. It's like, and Hill House is the only thing that gives you that. Or you have a weird musty relationship like the one between the two sisters in We Have Always Lived in the Castle.
Yes.
Where one of them is taking the blame for everything that the other person does. And so in a strange way, it's like they're married. It's like, it's like I have devoted myself to my sister, to Mary Cat for the rest of my life. It's like, we're just going to live in this, burnt out ruin. Every once in a while, the people from town will come and like burn down the place we live in, and Mary Cat will be fine, I guess. It's like, and I, meanwhile, will stick around and take the blame for everything. And, it's like, or, in things like Hangs a Man, where it's like, what's the ultimate freedom? The ultimate freedom is to disappear.
Yes.
The ultimate freedom is to do things and not be blamed for them because you don't know you're doing them. The ultimate freedom is to erase yourself from your own life, which is terrible. It's awful, but at the same time, it's so female and therefore very, very, very much something that can be applied to the queer female experience, where.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of erasing yourself, the getting slightly away from lesbian fiction, but E.M. Forster's novel Morris.
Yes.
Apparently there was going to. I mean, he had various. He had a couple of different ideas for the ending. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if I remember rightly, at this sort of the novel ends with him, visiting the guy who has been his sort of his who had been in the past his kind of chaste love. They kind of agreed that they were both gay, but they mustn't, as long as they didn't actually act on it.
Yes, his idée fixe, his his idol.
But he had actually. I have shared with Alec, I think is the phrase. I think I remember one of my old English teachers referring to this book and saying that it was referred to as sharing, and he'd recently been reading it or something, and that he was at some church meeting. He was actually a vicar, reverend, and so he says, "Well, thank you very much for sharing, Reverend." I think he was desperately trying not to piss himself laughing in that context. But apparently, I think one of the endings he considered was to be sort of a final sort of an epilogue set many years after the end of the book, because the book ends with him just basically telling his former lover, I have shared with Alex, we're going off together, and he just then turns around and he's gone, and he's just disappeared off to a new life.
Right. Hey, remember all those times we didn't have sex? Fine, sex. with a dude. It's great.
Well,
Gotta go.
there was going to be an epilogue where one of his sisters basically, gets lost in the woods or something and runs into a pair of, like, I don't know, charcoal burners or something who are just living in a little cottage.
Yeah.
And I think presumably the implication was going to be this is him and Alec who are just kind of like living quietly away from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But again, that same kind of thing, they're raising themselves in their own lives. It's the only way to actually have something like the life you want.
Yes, exactly. That we're going to have to go and live in the woods in a charcoal burner's hut, and no one will care because, two weird dudes who live in the woods, who cares what they do,
Yeah. The sort of the lengths to which you can have a person can be willing to go or maybe compelled to go just to be able to have something comparatively simple, just to be able to have a little space they can call their own and be who they are without having to hide it or be constantly watching out for, sort of somebody to see it and scream and disapprove of it, kind of thing. It's
that you have to remove yourself from society, that you have to remove it's like, and listen, if you love the person that much, then what does it matter, because you would want to be with that person all the time. And certainly, I mean, it's like Carmilla and Laura, it's like they'd be fine if they were living in old Karnstein Manor. Well, and if Carmilla wasn't a vampire.
Yes, if she wasn't like this homicidal, blood-drinking monster who was just out to make her Laura one of her latest of her long line of victims, kind of.
Well, I mean, there's nothing inherent in. Yeah, it's interesting with Carmilla. There's nothing inherent in the narrative that presumes that you can turn somebody else into a vampire. You can turn them into a lesbian, but you can't turn them into a vampire, which is kind of sad. It's sort of like, so I guess Carmilla was like, what, born a vampire, and then she died, and she was and woke up and was like, well, I'm a vampire now. It's like you're never quite sure how these weird aristocratic vices, propagate themselves.
I mean, a few people have kind of approached the idea in fiction of this, that the traditional view of that everyone who's killed by a vampire becomes one, implies kind of geometric progression, which would eventually.
Well, that's why eventually you end up with narratives where people are like, okay, so you can suck people's blood, but then you have to just kill them. You have to just separate their heads.
Yeah, I mean, of course, having watched What We Do in the Shadows, I'm firmly of the opinion that the reason that vampires haven't taken over the world is that all vampires are fucking morons.
This is also true. This also could quite possibly be true.
So most of them just like Darwin Award themselves out of existence one way or the other within like the first 6 months.
Creepy paper. Well, Nadia seems to have kept the three of them alive for a certain amount of time.
Kate's very fond of the Nadia doll. And she was finding every excuse to sort of use the elements. Like when anyone at work was trying to do something, she says, "Good luck. I do not think you will succeed."
Sensible. Anyways, So up to a certain point, you're being presented with this, with this narrative of monstrosity, and it's monstrosity you don't choose, much like a werewolf. It's monstrosity you don't choose because you got infected by somebody else. Or it's monstrosity you do choose because you're evil and you have a pact with the devil, or it's monstrosity you can only, that you can only be innocent of if you literally don't know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm in a trance, or I'm possessed, or
yes. I got possessed, and suddenly I was super gay. What was that about? It's like it was the devil. It was the devil making you gay.
Yes.
So, and someday we got to talk about possession horror, and I will tell you about Malachi Martin's wonderful book about all the people he either exorcised or the exorcisms that he heard about.
Okay, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, hostage to the devil. And so many of them are like, oh man, I got all fucked up on existentialism, and next thing I knew,
I thought you were going to say ecstasy, but yeah, that either could work, I suppose.
Existentialism, and next thing I knew, possessed. It's just like I thought I was transgender, but actually possessed. It's like sorry, I thought that I could. Oh yeah, actually, one of the people is fairly obviously a follower of the same guy that Blatty based based the actual Exorcist on, based the Max von Sydow character on. A guy who's an archaeologist and a Catholic priest.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, that's a reach around. That's a serious reach around, man. It's like I went so far around that I was pissing on the model for that character, for Father Marin. It's like, no, it's like, yeah, the guy who Father Marin is based on may think that he's very, very holy, but I don't think so. I think that if you followed that guy, pretty soon, possessed. So yeah, so a lot of the early stuff is whether gay or lesbian, but I think more overtly with lesbianism is very much about how can I manage to be gay in a world where I can't even talk about my own sexuality. Even if I was straight, I couldn't talk about my own sexuality. In a world where I'm supposed to be, it's like I'm supposed to desire, but more to be desired. I'm supposed to be the angel of the house. Find a guy and attach myself to him and be the helpmeet, be the person who's always there to go, oh, darling. Don't pull up his face, honey.
Husband in 1860. My wife, who cannot vote and has 0 orgasms, is depressed. Doctor, obviously she's insane.
I just don't understand. Yeah. So, and that's what I find interesting about lesbian horror. In fact, how much it is entirely, much more to some degree than gay horror. That it's tied in much more to being a woman. And maybe that's because guys, it's like they don't have to think of themselves as guys necessarily. They think of themselves as just I am me, person doing person things.
Yeah. But if some part of your identity is suddenly used to kind of define you and make you other and make you lesser or considered inferior or barred from doing this, that, or the other, then it becomes
and that's beyond your sexuality. That's entirely beyond your sexuality.
And I mean, obviously, I'd like to. I mean, I think we should move to sort of more look at some modern writers. But
I agree.
What you're saying about the about how lesbian horror specifically kind of is very much a horror about the horror of being a woman in a sense. In that sense, that brings to mind a certain subset of lesbian horror, which is written by writers like Kiernan or Hailey Piper, who are both lesbian and trans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and very much body horror. Caitlin's stuff has, it's like they started out as it was kind of a certain punk horror, a certain I think they would say themselves, they don't even like to be called a horror writer. So but
does Caitlin identify as they now rather than...
Yes, Caitlin does identify as they now. So yeah, they very much like ladies and have since the beginning. And their protagonists are almost always female. I actually can't think of any novel protagonists that aren't female. But more and more, I've seen this real shift from like punk Lovecraftiana in the very beginning to a cosmic horror, which is more and more involved with body horror and transformative horror. The kind of thing where it's like which definitely aligns them with people like Hailey Piper. It's like, yeah, the idea is like I turned into a vagina that was full of teeth, and my vagina like popped out of my body and went roaming around. It was a kaiju-sized vagina. That's actually a very Caitlin kind of image, in an odd way. Yeah. It's sort of like I turned into Mother Hydra and fucked Father Dagon. It's like I became, oh God, there's this amazing story, and I can't remember what it's called, but where there's a woman who has a black hole in her body.
Oh, okay.
And it's like you can go see her. She lives in a trailer park. You can walk into her trailer, and it's like, she's sort of like a cult of, not exactly a cult leader, but like, it's like, yeah, well, would you like to see worship this object of worship? Would you like to see that? It's like, here we go. And here's this black hole, in her body.
Would you like me to show you my hole? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You want me to show you my hole, which, if you look far enough through it, you can see another universe. It's pretty amazing. It's all stuff like that. It's like more and more and more, it becomes stuff like that. And even their obsession with ghouls, with the idea of being like a ghoul, a half ghoul, a person who's being raised by ghouls, who's almost like a ghoul changeling, and the necrophagy and that goes along with that, breaking down the body, building the body back up. I really think that everything is about transformation. Everything is about, how entropy takes over and breaks you down, and then you become something else, and then you become something else, and then you become something else. And that there is no end to everything. I don't think anything ever ends in one of Caitlin's, narratives, really.
Yeah, because she's quite, she has quite a, certainly following her on Facebook, she's got quite a downbeat take on everything, really.
Yeah, but also a very scientific. Trained as a paleontologist, vertebrate paleontologist. And, when you look at things from, as I've said before, when you look at things from a scientific point of view, there is no end. No beginning, and there is no end. There's no beginning, and there is no end. And
the sad end.
Yes, exactly. And and I, so in a strange way, I find their fiction oddly, oddly comforting. But they're also the same writer who puts a lot of, for example, dildo fucking in things, and like,
not wrong with that.
Yep, absolutely. And and a wonderful relationship between two lesbians, one of whom is cis and one of whom is trans, in the center of The Drowning Girl.
Yeah.
And I've loved the way that Caitlin's stuff more and more kind of exists in a universe without dudes. It's just sort of like, it's definitely no relationships with dudes, but more and more just a universe where every character, and certainly all the characters that are involved in relationships with each other, always female, always identify as female. And yeah, I find that really cool. But that idea of body horror, that idea of transformation, that idea of, I'm going to take even things that might be happening to me that seem like they would be negative, and it's like, I'm going to enjoy this so much. It's almost like, I used to, particularly when I was working in Lovecraft, I became kind of, when you're reading nothing but porn on your breaks, because that's all you've got, and you're not allowed to bring books into the store because goddamn that you should do stuff even on your breaks that doesn't involve the store. These were the same people who told me that I should smile more on my breaks. It's like, why do you go to the back and immediately you look like you're so depressed? I'm like, no, that's my face. It's like,
resting
me.
Face.
I'm just looking like me.
There's a comedian called Morgan Murphy. I don't know if you've seen her. She mainly think works as mainly script writing, but she did do a stand-up comedy special called Irish Goodbye, which I hugely recommend. But she's often quite deadpan with quite a sort of monotone kind of voice. And at the beginning, she comes on. She goes, "I'm not gay. Just wanted to get that out there. I'm not gay. I'm just depressed, and it reads the same. Oh, she must really love pussy. No, I hate life. Same."
Oh God, that's great. Anyway, so when you read porn a lot, you become kind of obsessed with the idea of a pornocentric universe where just it's like people, anytime people get within a certain what do you call that? They get close enough to each other. It's like, anytime people get close enough to each other, they're gonna have sex, I guess. It's like you stop for a minute and there's another person within reach. It's like, and you're in like an elevator or something, sex. It's like everything is sex.
There's an episode of Friends where Chandler and Joey got the free porns coming on their TV, and so they just kept it tuned to that channel. And at one point, Rachel's just wanting it going, wow, 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 going on my head.
Wow. Yeah, and and so it may seem very reductionist, but in a weird way, I often find the kind of body horror that Caitlin practices and the cosmic horror that Caitlin practices as being a bit like a pornocentric universe, where it's just like, entropy is eventually going to take the place of everything. So I'm just going to enjoy myself. It's like, spores. Spores colonizing my body. I'm turning into a mushroom, a gigantic mushroom. It's great. I'm so far into space that pretty soon I'm going to reach the event horizon and get smashed so that I'm just one atom. It's great. It's the best, and I certainly see that in Hailey's stuff as well.
Oh God, I mean, I'm just, I'm kind of just blown away by the sort of the invention and the energy of Hailey's work. And she's just she's farming stuff out like there's no tomorrow, basically. Which, let's face it, there may not be. He says, cheerful bastard that he always has been.
Yeah. I wish it was working on me that way. I wish I was like, just like, get an idea. But no.
But yeah, I mean, unfortunate elements of my anatomy is just like such a brilliant collection.
Yeah.
I mean, I will admit I haven't read I've read comparatively little of Caitlin's stuff. I'm ashamed to admit. What I have read, I've really loved, but I don't know it deeply enough to sort of be able to sort of spot those, to be able to sort of speak with the same authority on the common kind of, kind of recurrent themes and how that compares to Hailey's work. But I can certainly imagine Caitlin being an influence on Hailey, because how could they not be?
I hope so. Caitlin's can be a bit of an acquired taste, but they write so much and so consistently, and especially for a person who seems to be really depressed all the time, and I don't blame them, but depressed and exhausted, it's like finished and yet another story.
Of course, someone's identifying with them pronouns. Does that mean non-binary? Because
non-binary, I think, yeah.
I'm not quite sure if that does that mean we should still be? Does that mean we should still be? I know there's a couple of non-binary writers who are quite adamant about not wanting to be included in lists of female writers or whatever. So I was going to mention Cassandra Core as well, but I think Cassandra identifies as them. I could be wrong. So again,
I think that is true. I've met Cassandra, but not like super intimate. That sounds weird. Yeah.
Once at a convention a few years ago, had dinner at the Solaris Books. We're doing a dinner for some people, some of their writers, and we chatted a bit.
We were on a couple of panels together, but I wasn't talking directly enough to Cassandra to use pronouns. I'm pretty sure that Caitlin's okay with it, with being considered female. And next time around, let's move from early to now. And
I keep worrying that we've missed some important.
I'm sure we have.
I'm
sure we have.
any of our listeners, if please feel free to let us know who we've missed, preferably without swearing at us in the process.
You know what I would say? I would say if you have a favorite person that you would have liked to have heard about, then please tell us about that person. And it's entirely likely that we'll end up going, oh shit, yes.
Or even if we're not familiar with them, it'll be like, oh great, and because our TBR lit piles are in no way massive creaking behemoths that threaten to topple and crush us beneath their weight. We can always they are, but we could always add another text to them.
That I think is the truth. That I think is the absolute truth.
For now, that's all we've got time for. But keep watching this space for our interview with Paula Ash coming very soon, along with much else besides. Until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I remain Gemma Files.
And
this of course, was
No Darkness
But Ours.